Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Medicine 3.0. This is your place to learn about precision medicine, longevity medicine, AI in healthcare. And this week, I'm speaking with Erik Hernandez. He is a strength and conditioning coach at the University of North Carolina, where he works with Olympic sports, lacrosse. He's been doing this for nearly 2 decades. He's an amazing fount of knowledge when it comes to how do you get strong, how do you stay strong, how do you make progress. I think you're really going to enjoy this. This is for everybody because we talk about how do you take that teenage kid who is completely out of shape and help them make progress. This isn't just for the athletes out there. How do you take that older person who's never worked out and help them make progress? So I think this is something that anybody can enjoy. Sit back, relax, enjoy. All right, Erik, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jared.
Okay, start off like I do every time. How did you end up where you're at, knowing what you know?
It's really important for me to always kind of give a how I got to being a strength and conditioning coach. So I'm a strength and conditioning coach currently at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where I work with several Olympic sports, including our men's lacrosse team, our volleyball team, and both of our golf teams. I'm also helping with our gymnastics team right now, but I've been in the capacity with almost every team on campus. I've helped at some point. But how I got here started back when I was a college athlete myself in Illinois. I went to Loyola University in Chicago, and I originally wanted to be a doctor. I actually got a notification on my Facebook from this happened 16, I think it was 17 years ago today. You took the MCAT. And that's when it all kind of changed for me. The health journey has always been important because I always maximized my genetic potential, I felt like, because I used the weight room. I was a short guy. I had more hair back then, but that's something, that I can't work off right now. But, and I didn't have a lot of athletic prowess because of my height and stature. I was in football and I was in track and field. Both things were, because I was a thrower, you needed some general mass and height and things like that, which I didn't have. So I found a way in the weight room to kind of maximize those and improve, best improve on what I had. So I was always really interested in health. So then when I got to college, I'm like, all right, what makes me a little bit more money? Oh, PT. Okay. And then I transferred from Illinois, Chicago to Loyola, and they didn't have a PT route. So I went into biology because I could be going whatever I want to. Then I thought, well, I kind of want to, be a doctor one day. I think it'd be cool. I could be a sports med doctor and help people out when they get injured. I took the MCAT, did terrible on it. And the next day I pretty much said to my strength coach at the university, I'm like, I don't know what I want to do now because I'm not taking that thing again. I had a great GPA, but I just could not take the MCAT. And so then he's like, why don't you become a strength coach? And I was like, all right, sounds cool. This is what I'm doing anyways. I love the weight room. I'm truly passionate about this because of what it's done for me. And then that's kind of what started the route. I started interning. I worked at a high school originally. Then I went to Arizona State University. When I graduated, I was an intern there. Then I started as an intern at UNC 15 years ago. I went to Tulsa a little bit. So that's how I kind of got to where I am today. But I think what's more kind of what I really love about this profession is how it still keeps hand in hand with medical professionals, with health and well-being. And I was lucky enough to have some mentors early on that taught me the importance of really diversifying your network for the health concerns, that you're going to deal with. Because weight training is great, but what are you going to do when an injury happens? What are you going to do to prep yourself nutritionally for those? What are you going to do to make sure that you're able to repeat what you can because of all the little things that you can be managing and everything that involves around the other side of just the lifting the weights, the running and things like that. And so then I started getting in touch with different doctors and nutritionists and therapists, and it just made me see strength and conditioning completely different. So my lens now of watching someone work out has all these different other things that I filter out when watching someone, simply do a squat, a press, a pull, a run, or whatever that may be. And then on a personal note, I've had some health health issues in the past. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and I was put on some pretty heavy medication. And I used that network to kind of figure out, well, what are my other options as opposed to just being medicated? And I was able to, through nutrition, through training, kind of get off of all medication. Then I had another pop up when my low back came back from the history issue. My daughter was born. I couldn't sit on the ground and play with her without having to sit up, stand up, or be in pain. And that was another thing that was like, I can't be a subject to pain all the time and not be there for my family. So I go back to my network and I realize there's some missing components in my rehab and my different things that I can integrate into training now. So I'm not a doctor by any means, but I saw it kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm helping myself with a lot of different things from this great network, and I'm realizing the value long-term that health can have, training can have on your health. If you look at it if you put these other things in there, that I've had no choice but to get comfortable with. So where I'm at today, I'm now servicing student athletes. I have individual clients on the side as well, and I have an online business as well, to where I'm able to take all these different components and fit them into a client and athlete's workout that have considerations that they haven't even thought about yet. It may be as simple as a small tweak, but that small tweak not making that small tweak, in the past has led to a big issue. So I'm just really happy that I can start to be on the other end of things now and offering a diverse experience that takes a lot of guesswork out for some people, so they don't make mistakes that I made mistakes in the past.
Yeah. Well, when I listen to you tell your story, there's a few things that stick out. Of course, I think it's so interesting I think all providers of whatever, if it is a doctor, a trainer, a strength coach like yourself, we use our own experience to grow our knowledge and to learn and to become better at our craft. One thing I really liked is how you talked about pulling all this information from other places. But one place that I'd love to hear a little bit more from you on is something that is so normal to you that you don't even think to talk about it very much, because you talked about like, oh, I decided to become a strength coach, and then that was kind of like assumed that I was expert at it. And then I added all these other frames. But I imagine you've done a ton of work to become even more and more expert on just like the strength coach part of that over getting close to 2 decades of doing this. So tell me a little bit about that trajectory. Like, how have you kind of built that craft of strength coach outside of like all the different expertise that you've kind of integrated in?
Yeah, I mean, like the traditional route is like you take some sort of background in undergrad that gives you some general advice on some training ideas, and then you get your certification, and then it's like, all right, go ahead, and now you're an expert. Like now you're qualified to train people. Couldn't be further from the truth. The certification is one thing. It's basically to weed out like complete insanity of training that you see sometimes. But after that, it really comes down to, it came down for me like a proper assessment of my strengths and weaknesses as a provider. Every year I pretty much do this, and I think, what is the next thing for me? When I was young, it was just how good of a communicator was I. I didn't have enough I didn't have enough real life information to really to be an expert. I needed to coach. I needed to coach anybody who was in the room. I needed to experiment with cues. I needed to see different movements. I needed to see everything. So number one was just accumulation of coaching reps and refinement, which never stops. And honestly, none of these ever stop, right? I'm kind of a geek about some special forces type stuff, and I heard like one quote's like, the training never stops. Mm-hmm. And it's just like anything, the training never stops of refining even the same thing that that you've already become a master at. Like there's always the deeper levels. Yeah. So that was one. It was like, have I accumulated just enough reps in the gym and interactions? Number two, programming wise, like what's my model? How do I know when to progress somebody? How do I know when to change sets, when to change reps? How do I plan? How do I plan appropriately? That was another thing I needed to get really, really good at was program design and periodization, planning over a long term, because it's cool to, it's really easy to make up an exercise, but like in order to actually get, or a workout, but in order to actually get results, like you need to have kind of a roadmap. And that's what periodization essentially is. And if you don't have one where the turns add up, then you don't know where you're going to be. So one, I need to be able to communicate with people, because if it can be the most perfect plan ever, but if you can't communicate what they're doing or whatever, it doesn't matter. Two, I need to have a plan that actually drifts them towards where they want to be. And then each component of the training session you need to be an expert in coaching. So if someone has to run, you need to be an expert in how to teach people to run. You can't just say, go run. You have to understand mechanics. You have to understand cueing and changing little things. If I want to expect somebody to do an Olympic lift, I need to understand the Olympic lifts very well. Until then, I shouldn't program it. The squat. I mean, there's, how many different videos and seminars I've been doing about the squat, right? And that's just one exercise. But that mastery has really helped me in those instances where I need to make modifications and coach and prevent things from happening, or make sure we get an outcome because of how deep I went onto one exercise. And then of lately, I've been trying to really work on kind of some more leadership type things, to when I'm asked to, like, from coach, I'm in a coaching environment, I'm often asked to like provide this leadership and this standard creating and all this types of big responsibilities that will resonate throughout the entire program. And I have to be pinpoint with how I approach these with such a diverse population, of training backgrounds, of just who people are. And that's a lot of leadership responsibility. So all these things have to be mastered as much as possible, or at least dove deep on, in order to put together just what happens in a session. A session starts up, there's communication that has to happen. There's organization that has to happen. There has to be execution where we just decide things. We have to have standards so they know where to go towards. You have to have constant communication feedback throughout the session. And then throughout it, at the end, you have to have some mobility and things like that you have to be really comfortable with. And how does it affect what you did in the program positively, sending them into the next thing? And then how do you debrief the situation to where they got something out of it and they understand the purpose of the session? Those are all things that happen in the session, but have to be mastered individually and then repped out over time to become a good strength coach.
Yeah. I feel like one way I'll often talk about things that are simple but complex, because when I hear you talk through like all the different facets that you've learned, all the different things that you spend your time on, it kind of shows like this isn't just lifting a weight. Like, this is a complex thing. And so, like, I think about the alphabet. Like, it's not hard to learn the alphabet. We teach 4-year-olds the alphabet, but they're not Walt Whitman. They're not Emily Dickinson. Like, it takes a master of the alphabet to do certain things with the alphabet. Mm-hmm. And I think for yourself, like, you've spent tens of thousands of hours in the gym, working with athletes, coaching athletes, refining your skills. And now you've kind of achieved this mastery level. And so I'm super excited, because what I want to ask you about next is, okay, as a regular person, a non-athlete, how do I work with somebody like you, or how do I work with the knowledge that you have and start thinking about training for life, training myself to live the longest, healthiest life possible?
That's a great question. And I think it probably relates a lot to what Bionic is doing as well, is you have to develop as much information about yourself first as possible.
Yeah.
Where really am I at right now? And being honest with yourself. Where are we really at? If it's funny because almost every intake is pretty much the same. Someone tells me where they're really at. And then as we go along and we're going through things, now one thing comes out, one thing comes out, one thing comes out. And then from the start to the finish, actually, they're probably about 20% under what they kind of predicted of where they're at. And it doesn't matter. It's all relative. I tell this to my athletes all the time. If, for example, like I have some guys who can bench press 225 pounds. And I'm like, all right, cool. That is not a strong bench press. And they kind of look at me like crazy. I'm like, I've seen people bench 350, 405, 500. I said, now you're understanding that it's, relatively speaking, it isn't that impressive. It's not that you're not impressive. It's just that you need to understand where you're at, and that if you think that like that should be your only goal, then you're selling yourself short because you do a lot of other things really, really good. Like if it's a lacrosse player, like I can't do a portion of what you guys can do on the field. All right. But I can bench more than you. It doesn't matter. So really knowing where you're at and really like being honest with yourself. Hey, I'm 20 pounds overweight. I have no hip mobility. I usually get out of breath when I walk to the car. Like that's honest. Okay. Well, now you have some actionable things you need to work on, and none of them have to do with your bench press, your squat, or anything else. Like these are actionable things that you can start to see an image in, like imagine while you're doing whatever your workout is that you end up coming to, right? Because if you have actionables that are really real to you, then you start to see results. Because anytime you work with somebody, you have to see results, and everyone's practice is completely different. Some people, it's just like, I haven't worked out in 2 years. Okay. So can you get one workout in a week? That's now because this is a common one. I have an online training group for athletes that have graduated, and they just don't know what to do anymore because their entire 4 or 5 years at college, they show up, they got workout to do, they do it, and they leave. They do that on recycle for 4 or 5 years, and some of them never realize like how we set everything up, which is fine. Like I don't expect them to. That's not their job. But now they're in this phase of like, well, I used to practice 6 to 7 days a week. I used to work out 3 to 5 days a week. Now I work out 3 times a week. I'm failing. Like, no, well, welcome to the real world. 2, what is your goal? Like, is your goal to compete in the CrossFit or something like that? If it is, well, then that's not good enough. Is your goal just to stay fit and active? Well, guess what? That's good. We'll start with that. If you have 5 workouts in the week that I wrote and you can only make 3 of them, that is still progress, because you go back to that person who hasn't worked out for a year or 2. Now they've in 3 weeks done, we'll say on the low end, they've done 3 to 6 workouts. Well, you've done more workouts in the past 3 weeks than you've done in the past 2 years. Tell me that isn't progress. You can't, right? So your trend, you got to find like you have to be brutally honest where you're at, and you have to find the minimal benchmarks that you can realistically attain. Maybe it's I've eaten breakfast with protein in it. And those over time will add up. It's just being extremely honest with where you're at and trusting whoever you're working with. And I even work with a coach myself, and I'm not afraid to be completely honest. And a good coach will be like, well, that's a win. This is a win here. This is a win there. Because in life, training for life, it's about who can do it the longest. The longer you can keep consistent on your training into your older years, well, the more you're going to be fighting off father time, right? You're not going to be hunched over as much, and you'll pay off those 1 workouts a week will pay off later on, that hopefully, you're looking taller than the other people around you in the retirement community, because now you have the strength in your back or something like that. Right. But like it can be that simple as like just stacking the workouts up. We've heard those all the time, stack days, but it's reality. It's for me, I'm not trying to win a fitness competition. I'm not trying to throw shot put far anymore. I'm trying to work out hopefully 4 to 5 days a week. I'm trying to be able to play with my kids and not be the dad that can't get off the bench because, he's much more comfortable sitting down. Those are my goals. And if I'm close to that, well, then that's a training win for me. So extreme honesty, realistic goals, and tying back your goals to a consistent basis to your training. When I get into training, like when I go to train, when I squat, I better squat all the way down. Why? Because I want to be able to pick my kids up from the ground. All right. So if I'm keeping that range of motion, well, that's feeding back into what's important for me. So being very honest with yourself and putting the egos to the side. And the other thing is, I think, intensity, right? The other thing I get a lot of people is like, well, how hard should I be pushing in your workouts? I said, well, it depends on your outcomes, right? If your outcomes are like, you really need to drive up your bench press, if you really need to like compete for this, well, then you need to sit down and work on the intensities, which usually I lay out for them. But some people, with how stressful their work life balance is and things like that, they can't handle that much intensity. I have one client recently that, I've been talking to her about it, and she's like, I just feel like I'm not getting enough out of my workouts. I said, well, do you feel like you're pushing hard on everything? Yeah, and I'm just kind of getting burnt out. I said, okay, pick one exercise every 3 weeks that you want to really improve on over the 3, and get the other one just to get the work in. So you'll still find you'll find that thing that you want. You want to feel some intensity. You can only do so much of it. So you drive up your overhead press for 3 weeks. You drive up your chin up for 3 weeks, and then everything else just kind of fills it in, because then it's just like 2 days a week where you got to be really intense, and the other days are building up days. So it's just kind of reformatting, right? Taking that awesome drive that you have and just putting it in the right directions to show, well, yeah, you are making progress more so than you think you are.
Yeah. I mean, wow. You said a lot of interesting things there that I think are worth like just spending a second on. I think relativity is really important. People see things online like, hey, I should have a 6-pack because this person has a 6-pack. I should be able to lift this much because this person lifts this much. And I think real personal, like training, care, whatever it is so important for somebody to be, like you said, brutally honest with yourself. Like, okay, this is where I'm at and I want it to change. And then I also loved the realistic goals. So like coming up with those goals. And I mean, you didn't talk about goals of benching 500 pounds. You talked about goals of, progress and little things that may be like eating protein for breakfast. And then coming up those end in mind kind of goals. Like, do I want to be able to squat down and pick up my grandkid? Well, then let's work on that range of motion right now. Let's get you that range of motion so that you can keep it and continue to progress with it. And you mentioned kind of this intake that you'll go through with your clients. And what are some of the main things that you find as you go through an intake with somebody that really helps you kind of fine tune how you're going to push them, how you're going to train them, how you're going to program them? What are those main things that you do during that intake that guide you?
So I think the biggest thing is I tell them, in your words, why are you coming to me? Like, tell me why, what's interesting? Like, what's making you tick? Why are you coming here? I need to hear their words first. If they give me their words, then I can use those words to create a message that makes sense for them, because it's going to be unique to them. Everyone pretty much has the same goals, but everyone needs to hear it the way that they think it, right? So if they can say it, then I can be like, okay, then I can grab onto that. The other thing I ask them is, what do you think it takes to get those goals? You'll see two types of people. You'll see the person that just has no idea, and they're like, working out, and which I'm like, yeah, it's true. And I always make sure I tell them like they're right? Yeah, you're right. It does take that, and this is how that goes into, because it's not me trying to belittle them or anything. I'm helping them get their goals, right? But then the other person who has the list of everything they need to do, that is almost too much for them. Like, that's too much for anyone to attain, right? It's like, it's unrealistic, and that's going to be hard too, because then they're going to be constantly met with failures because their list of what needs to be successful is way too long. So those two, I gotta kind of see where they're at, and either way, I kind of talk. So the person who's got a laundry list of what they need to do, I try to talk to them about, like, let's just pick a couple, because you could think this, and I try to figure out where it's coming from. A lot of times it's like, well, like you said, social media, I see this. Well, do you know this person probably does this, and that, and the other? That's the only thing they read. That's why they look like this. That's all, like, so you have this, and that. So unless you're willing to give those things up, which I don't think you should, then maybe we just tweak a little bit of where you're thinking, right? And the person who has no idea and say, oh, it's great. Consistency. That's the one thing that we want to work on, is being consistent. So that comes from like the communication side. And then from there, like, I mean, I need to know how someone squats. I need to know how someone can squat with their hands behind their head, because it mimics what's on a bar, right? Your posture, because it's going to tell me everything about like their ankle, their knee, their hip, their mid back, their low back, their neck, their shoulder. I need to see how they do that stuff. And I need to know immediately if there's a red flag on what I need to do with them. I need to see them split squat. I need to know what the hip flexibility is like for them. I need to see how they do a push-up. I need to see how they do an inverted row, or a row of some sort, so I can see how the shoulder moves. And then usually I can see what I need to, like, by the time I get done with that. And then body comp, I don't go deep on the body comp stuff just because it's not my wheelhouse. I don't necessarily have the drive to go deeper into it, other than like referring out and knowing numbers, because I found that no matter where people are at, usually the baseline of training, the way that I've kind of feel comfortable in my system, most people will lack that. So it doesn't even matter. Like, body comp starts to get better just as we get better with training. So the basement is just like, can you do these foundational components that I normally do with everybody? Most people struggle with that. So until we get that, like, I could care less about anything else, because I know that if you can't do proper range of motion squats, if you can't do proper, like, a warm up without being fatigued, if you can't properly work through full range of motion, it's not going to really matter what your body comp is, like all these other things, because that the basement just needs to be fixed.
Yeah. You know, I love data, but I feel like for most people, like body comp, for example, like, I love data. I love knowing that their bones are healthy and that they have lots of muscle and what their fat percentages are. Like, that's helpful, but mostly it's just helpful to inspire them for change. Like, once they're with you, like, and they're decided to work out, I know their body composition is going to change. Like, every one of those things is going to change. And I know they're moving in the right direction. And after that, I really don't care very much about the body comp.
Yeah.
If they're progressing the way they should, and they're, like you said, stacking days, because consistency is everything. I'm curious, if you think about your, like, the athletes you've worked with, or even the members you've worked with in your training business, can you think of any examples of somebody that kind of outperformed what you thought they would, or outperformed kind of their genetic potential and did more than you thought possible?
I have it's actually one of my favorite clients ever. I mean, just people I've worked with ever. I had and I know his mom would be okay with me sharing this information. This young man came to me. He was in he might have been 7th or 8th grade. I can't remember either one. I think it was 8th. Then the start of his 8th grade or so. No, it was end of his 7th grade. Sorry. But his coach had referred me to him, and he said, you know, he can't finish a lap around the field. Like, he really needs help. He's a big kid, you know, big tall kid, but also, you know, he had some body comp things that we're working on. And his mom, sweetest woman, she comes over, she brings him over, and this kid was just so sweet. I mean, just an absolute teddy bear. And he could not squat without holding on to these handles and going to maybe parallel. Not even parallel. Like I don't even know what angle. Like, we had a box and he couldn't go to it.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 3 years later, he front squatted 135 pounds, full range of motion, torso relatively upright. He got long limbs, and he eats protein 3 times a day, drinks his water, sleeps well. plays lacrosse, on a regular basis, does everything, always has a smile on his face. This young man has been the most impressive journey. It is, yeah. I mean, he just like, you look at him, and it's funny because I have, he's in this one workout group that I have, and when I have like new coaches that help me, they're like, yeah, nice job, Nick. And then his mom will come up and like, this is what Nick looked like when he started with Erik. And they're like, wait, what? And all he did was he knew no better than just to listen and just take the advice that I gave him. And I wasn't like strict, do this, that. He just, hey, Erik, I did what you said. I ate 3 meals a day and ate, protein rich and blah, blah, blah. And just the basics that go over everyone. And he just, I mean, like, honestly, like I have no problem saying like his habits changed his life and saved his life. And I think he would admit to that as well. Now, if you'd see him, he's just a strapping young lad and the sweetest kid. But that has been like one of the coolest things. I mean, I've worked with really great athletes that come in really great athletes, and we just keep them great athletes. I can't really take much credit for that. Worked with some other kids who, that really attribute a lot of like what we've worked on. But they had it in them as well. Like that was just one of the coolest ones I've seen. So, and anyone that's worked with them, there's an awesome club that took him on and it just changed his life. So that's just one of my coolest ones. His name's Nick.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that's a testament to consistency, willing to work with a coach, listen to a coach, go through that guidance. I mean, that's super cool. And there really is something pretty special about taking somebody through that journey. It's not like we do the hard work. They're the ones that actually do the hard work. They put in the consistency day after day. But it's super cool to see people change. And I often talk about training is like, you should train to be the athlete of your life. 'Cause like, yeah, Nick's probably not going to be a professional athlete, but he's going to have such a better life than if he wasn't training. Like training taught him so much, transformed him so much. And I think you kind of laid out like the importance of during that intake, find out what is their drive, what is their motivation, help them remember that, help them plan it. It's really funny to hear you talk about like the two different kind of personas, like the one that's like, I mean, I guess I work out, and the other that's like, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. Because I was talking to one of our doctors yesterday, and she had just met with a member, and she's like, well, I mean, this guy wants to be under 10% body fat, wants to be able to squat 400 pounds, wants to like all these different things. And she's like, hold up, like you have some like contradicting goals here. So we're going to have to like think through how to prioritize and rank order this. So I'm curious, like, how do you work with those like type A personalities that come in and they're just like, I expect perfection in every part of my life. How do you help them kind of deal with that and then like achieve the best they can?
I think they work really well off of examples, and trying to give examples of like, like I said, luckily enough, I can work with athletes that are at a very high level and things like that. And I can use them as an example of, like, well, because there has to be concessions, and concessions are always the hardest thing to manage. Right. So that's one thing I try to tell them, like, okay, well, here's an example of somebody who there's the concessions they had to make for this, what they got based off of like, this, since they're such a high level that they're trying to get to, like, what you're trying to do that plus something else. So we have to give and take. We figure out where priority is. Or if you don't have those clients that you in your workbook, then you go talk about, professional athletes, their stories or things like that.
Yeah.
Or you just, or sometimes I'll just be like, well, here's this. They're going to, they don't work together. It's oil and water, like trying to make them understand that. And if it's not too crazy of a, like, and it is a high performing thing, just make sure they know everything it entails. Mm-hmm. Usually there's a financial thing to it as well. And if they're willing to do those commitments, like, are you going to seek regular blood work? Mm-hmm. Are you going to seek regular chiropractic? Are you going to seek regular massage? Are you going to seek regular this? Okay, well, these things might hold you back from it. So if you want to do that, that's fine. If you don't, just realize that this could end up this could end up this if you take these out. So what you're left with is this. It's your choice, because ultimately it's their choice. And I want to make sure that they're really clear about that, and that before we start together, that the expectations are clear. So if we don't hit our goal, we have something to refer back to of like why. It's not just, well, your program's stunk. It's like, no, well, I told you needed this. I told you needed this. I see that you didn't do this. Okay. But at the same time, building in fail safes is important, because along the way of any progress and working with somebody, there's going to be moments where you are going to learn a weakness that you didn't know there. There's going to be a failure somewhere there. Mm-hmm. And they have to know ahead of time that that's normal part of progress of anybody. And when we get to that, this is how we're going to handle that communication. We're not going to panic. We're going to use this as an opportunity to get better. So getting ahead of those situations, that's a big one I see with like rehab. I've done a lot of ACL rehabs, and every time, like I literally sit down and say, okay, here's the time you're going to meet with Doc. Doc is going to say you're cleared for running. You will not be cleared to run yet by this time. Here's why. You will not doing it. So what they're telling you is that you have the capability to start the progression. So when you leave that meeting and you tell me, hey, it's starting to start running, and I say, well, we haven't done anything yet because we haven't been cleared for it yet. Well, you have to understand that it is 3 weeks from now that we're going to actually be running or something. I try to, because then the meeting comes up, the reaction happens, and I say, remember we talked about this, and it's still the reaction, but I now can take a little bit of the edge off of it because we've talked about it before. So just knowing where the path really goes, and luckily I've just been through it enough times where I can talk about it, and having that. So just going back to like originally, like realistic expectations, but realistic expectations about things that they haven't thought about yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of education. Like helping them understand like these things aren't really compatible, or giving them a realistic timeline. Like, yeah, that is achievable. It's going to just take longer than you might think, or sounds like a lot of education in there. What do you see as like, what are some of the most common reasons that people kind of fail to achieve their goals after they come to you? Obviously it's like, not following the program, but like, what is it that usually gets in the way that makes it so they don't?
Unrealistic expectations for themselves. It's, oh yeah, I'm going to be able to get three days a week. And then they really hold themselves to that standard. They get 1, 2, then they feel failure, and then they fail. Yeah. Right. That's why I try to build in like the lower end, like, so let's get a whale or a win, because if we keep feeling failure, you're just gonna be like, it's easier just to not do it. Mm-hmm. That's one, is like unrealistic expectations in your goal setting. That's a big one, but there's also just like, a true, like, time is never on our side. It feels like in training, there's always a way to find something else to do, and time always inhibits someone's ability to work out. Mm-hmm. And it has to come to prioritizing it. Yeah. But even people who really prioritize it, like, I mean, the schedules that some people keep up, I don't know how they find time to train.
Right.
And they're not wrong with like, hey, when I get home, I'm going to be with my family. Hey, I can't wake up at 4 a.m. every day. I get it. Then that's where like, it's a realistic, it's a talk. Like you have to have like realistically, what can you commit to? And then what you can commit to, here's what the results you'll probably see from it is. So if they know that, then that's okay. If they think they can commit to 1 day and then they see, 10% drop in body fat, then unrealistic expectations.
Right.
Time. Mostly everybody, it's just like, I don't have enough time to do it. Like, okay.
Yeah. It's interesting also to think about like that first one that you kind of laid out, that like I fail and so I give up, and the importance to explain to people that like failure is part of the journey. Like, and because it is about progress, it's not about perfection. And so that if they commit to 3 days a week and they fail, like, okay, don't quit. Like, let's move to 2 days. Or if time becomes the thing, like, well, what can we do in 15 minutes? What can we do in 20 minutes? Like, because I found in the past for me, it was always like, I can't lift. I don't have an hour. And until I finally got to the point where I was like, oh, I guess I could lift for a half hour, which totally makes sense. Like, that shouldn't have been a blocker, but it was like totally this blocker for me for years until I was like, oh, actually, I don't have to do it like the way that I think is perfect. I can just do my best. So,
and I think a big thing of that is going into like, what's your expectations? You have to have realistic expectations, because if someone tells me they want this, but they can't put an hour in, and then they say, well, how about I do 30? Well, then I don't like to take that client, because they're putting an expectation on something that they're only committed to half of it, but they're going to want to see the 100% results, which is completely fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with their what they can fit in. They just need to make sure their goal is similar to that. Like, they're what they expect to get out from is like with you, like are you trying to be a bodybuilder? No. Are you just trying to move so you get 30 minutes of exercise? Well, guess what? That's appropriate to your goal, but I have had people that in the past have been like, I really want to get after. Okay. Hey, I want to get strong. I want to get this. What can you do with the hotel gym? And I'm like, they'll be the client. I'm like, hey, I don't think this is appropriate for you, because I'm going to be handcuffed so many different ways. You're going to need such a specialized program. It's just going to be us spinning our wheels for a goal that you want, where I don't think I can really, like, in this capacity, I don't think I can help you with it. Like, there's legitimate stopgaps where we're not going to be able to get to where you want to be. If you want to change your emphasis, okay, then we can definitely discuss, what makes sense. But we got to be realistic about your outcomes and your inputs.
Yeah. It's fascinating, just people's psyches, the way our minds work. And I think more than ever before, we realize that like muscle is the balance of health. Like, the more muscle you have, the stronger it is, the better it moves, the more mobile it is, like the longer you will be healthy. And it's interesting that for most people in the United States, that isn't how they think about health, right? They think about health as like, I didn't have to go to the doctor, I'm not on a medicine, or something like that. And I really love what you do, because it's helping more and more people adopt this idea of fitness, athleticism for long-term health. How would you have people reach out to you? Where can people find you if they want to work with you personally? Obviously, you work with your athletes, but you said that you do some personal training. How can people find you if they want to work with you?
Honestly, probably my website would be hernandezhealthandperformance.com, or easiest is probably my Instagram, Hernandez Strength. And then you can click on my link to my website. You can reach out to me. That's the easiest way. That's where I put most of training videos and advertisements for when I do group online groups and things like that. That's the best way to work with me in that setting.
Awesome. And you said that you advertise for when you do online groups. Do you do that like every so often? So
I typically do every 12 weeks.
Okay.
I'll put up, hey, new groups coming up. Like, we're having a new one up in 3 weeks, I believe. And then, going into this January, we'll probably do a little bit different model going forward, because those, just so people can be a little more consistent with the program. We're going to go probably to a subscription model in January, where people can just kind of subscribe monthly and be able to hop in and stay as consistent as possible.
I'm excited for people to work with you, and I think what you do is awesome. And Erik, I sure appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate your words. So what you guys do is awesome as well.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Medicine 3.0. We make this podcast so that you know where to turn for good information on keeping you and your loved ones healthy. Feel free to check us out at bionichealth.com, where we can help you live a longer, happier life.